Today we're going to read The Best Nest, which is one of Jill's favorite books when she was a little girl. Let's read. Look, these birds are flying around carrying sticks and feathers. I wonder what they're going to do. Mr. Bird was happy. He was so happy he had to sing. This is Mr. Bird's song. I love my house, I love my nest. In all the world, my nest is best. Then Mrs. Bird came out of the house.
It is not the best nest,
she said.
I'm tired of this old place,
said Mrs. Bird.
I hate it. Let's go look for a new place right now.
Boy, Mrs. Bird doesn't seem very nice, does she? So they left the old place to look for a new one. This place looks nice, said Mr. Bird. Let's move in here. I think they're going to move into this tree here, aren't they? But somebody else had already moved in. Oh no, it's a raccoon. So they looked at another house. This one looks nice, said Mr. Bird, and there's nobody in it. I think they're going to move into this shoe. Let's see.
You're wrong, said Mrs. Bird. This house belongs to a foot.
Boy, I hope it's not a stinky foot. You think that's a flower toe or a garbage toe? I don't know. But the birdies are flying away. As they went on looking, so they went on looking.
I like this one.
So they went on looking. I like this one, said Mr. Bird. It has a pretty red flag on the roof.
I've always wanted a house with a flag,
said Mrs. Bird.
Maybe this place will be all right.
Well, maybe it will. Uh-oh, but it was not all right. I guess I made a mistake, said Mr. Bird. Poor Mr. Bird, they're getting shoved out by guys delivering mail.
You make too many mistakes,
said Mrs. Bird.
I'm going to find the next house.
Mrs. Bird's kind of cranky, isn't she? She's a little bit cranky. They flew in. They looked around. Isn't it too big, said Mr. Bird.
I like big place. I like a big...
They flew in. They looked around. Isn't it too big, asked Mr. Bird.
I like this big place,
said Mrs. Bird.
This is the place where we should build our nest.
They flew in. They looked around.
Isn't it too big?
Boy. They flew in. They looked around. Isn't it too big, asked Mr. Bird.
I like this big place, said Mrs. Bird. This is the place to build our new nest.
Well, she certainly seems very convinced. They went right to work. They needed many things to build their nest. First, they got some hay. Then they got some soda straws. And they got some broom straws. And then they got some sweater string. Better be careful if you wear a sweater outside. They got some stocking string. Look, they're getting yarn from a sock, I hope. Is that a flower toe or garbage toe? And they got some mattress stuffing. Pulling that mattress stuffing right out. They got some horsehair. And they got some man hair. Look, that man has a beard, a gray beard, just like Poppy. Soon they had all the hay, all the straw, all the string, all the stuffing, all the horsehair, all the man hair that they could carry. They took it all back so they could build their nest. My goodness, they are carrying lots of things, aren't they? Mr. and Mrs. Bird worked very hard. It took them the rest of the morning to finish their nest.
This nest really is the best,
said Mrs. Bird.
I want to stay here forever.
Well, I'm glad she's finally happy. She's kind of been unhappy through the story, hasn't she? Every day at 12 o'clock, Mr. Parker came to the church. Mr. Parker came to pull a rope. The rope went up to the bird's new nest. Look at Mr. Parker. He looks like he's trying to climb that rope. He's just pulling it. The rope rang the big bell right under Mrs. Bird's nest. Bong, 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 bong. When Mr. Bird came in, all he could see was a mess of hay and string and stuffing and horsehair and manhair and straws. Where was Mrs. Bird? She's gone. She's gone. I will look for her until I find her, said Mr. Bird. He looked high. He looked low. He looked everywhere for Mrs. Bird. Do you see Mrs. Bird? I don't see her either. I wonder where she went. Mr. Bird looked down a chimney, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. Thank goodness. He looked down into a water barrel, but Mrs. Bird wasn't there. Oh, that's good too. She would be very wet. Mr. Bird flew off. I'll never see Mrs. Bird again, he cried. It was getting dark. It began to rain. It rained harder and harder. Mr. Bird could not see where he was going. Look, he's crying. His tears are mixing with the rain. Crash! Mr. Bird bumped into something. Oh no, it looks like he bumped his head. Owie. It was his old house. That old house that Mrs. Bird hated. I'll go inside, said Mr. Bird. I'll rest here until the rain stops. Poor Mr. Bird. He's all wet and cold. Mr. Bird went in. And there was Mrs. Bird, sitting there singing. I love my house, I love my nest. In all the world, this nest is best. She's all happy now and singing. What happened? You? Here? Gasped Mr. Bird. I thought you hated this old nest. Mrs. Bird smiled. I used to hate it, she said. But a mother bird can change her mind. You see, there's no nest like an old nest for a brand new bird. Oh, look at that. And when the egg popped open, the new bird thought so too. So Mrs. Bird turned out to be a happy bird and have a nice nest. I hope you have a good day. I love you.